It's 7 o'clock, so I am going to get started. Ready, Marco?
FairTV didn't reply back to me, but I believe they should be all set. If you guys want to raise your hand and
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 13th, 2024 meeting of the Board of Education. Call to order of the regular meeting. With us this evening is myself, Mrs. Jacobson, Mr. Krasnoff, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Maxine Kennelly, Mr. Lee, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Asa, and Mrs. Rinaldi. If everyone could rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And Mrs. Rinaldi, you can start us off this evening, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic,
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next item, student reports. So given today's snow day, our students have been excused from this evening's meeting. So we are going to skip over our student reports today, this evening, and we are going to go to item number 4, public comment. Members of the public were invited to sign up to give live public comment this evening. And with that, Ms. Marco, if you could go ahead and let the public comment speakers in.
neither of the individuals that signed up are on the call currently. So if you'd like to revisit it later, I'm happy to oblige, but for currently, neither of them are on the call.
Okay, no problem. Well, before we go on to the next item, I just want to remind members for remote meetings purposes, for any votes this evening, I will be asking for a roll call vote just to state your name and vote your position, please. That will also help us with the minutes. And as well as I cannot see everyone on my screen. So if you would like to raise your hand for comment, if you could please just use the hand emoji on the bottom part of your screen so that I know if people are waiting and would like to make a comment on any of the items this evening. So we haven't done this full remote in a while, so just wanted to go over a little bit of those housekeeping rules before we get started. So moving on to our next item, old business, approval of the grade 9 through 12 ELA curriculum. A recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the grade 9 to 12 English Language Arts curriculum per enclosure number 2 of the February 13, 2024 meeting. Can I please get a motion? Mrs. Maxine Kennelly, seconded by... Can I get a second? Mrs. Guernsey. Discussion? I don't see any.
Jen?
Yeah,
I just wanted to thank staff for being so responsive to the many emails and many drafts of edits that I submitted. I do sincerely appreciate not only the responsiveness, but the conversations that went along with it. One question that I know that the public, if they're paying attention, board members certainly know that one of the reservations I'd had with this curriculum involved the consistency of the experience across our courses and the assurance of certain rigor and certain expectations. And so I sincerely appreciate where we landed with that. I hope fellow board members saw the compromise that we arrived at in terms of staff still having the being empowered to recommend or to select a text for a second assured experience. The one question I had just wanted to ask Ms. Goss, if she could speak to, is the language that's included across almost all of the courses, certainly all of the appropriate courses involving literature, involves that staff will agree at the end of the previous school year to a common text, a second common text that, or in the case of the electives, a first common text that they will use. And I was wondering if you could speak to the nature of what that text would be.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Janine Goss, Executive Director of Pre-K-12 Literacy. Thank you for having me tonight. I will speak to, I guess, 3 buckets, if you will, where these 9-12 courses fell. So the first bucket are courses that already indicated that an initial required text is to be read by all students. The second bucket are courses that did not indicate a particular required text. And then there were courses that fell into another bucket where the requirement does not really apply. So in the courses that already indicated an initial required text, teachers will choose an additional text to be read annually by students from the course's core text resource list. These resource lists already contain full-length texts, and this is the case for courses such as English 9 College Prep, English 9 Honors, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12, all college prep as well as honors courses. Now, for courses that did not initially require a particular title, we did put a line in there that the teachers of that course will choose one common text to be read by all students from their core text resource list each year. And in some courses, you'll notice, such as in the Wide World of Sports Literature course or the Poetry Workshop course, the text chosen may not necessarily be a full-length text or novel, as noticed in the resource list, because there are a variety of other types of text and media that do support that course. And then that third bucket, in terms of courses that were not included in this requirement because it really didn't make sense to do so, really are courses that have a variety of text, films, and other media that do support that course, such as Intro to Journalism, Advanced Journalism, the acting courses 1 and 2, the performance studio courses 3 and 4. We also felt the same about creative writing, that really should not apply there. The film analysis and criticism courses, as well as the AP Lit and AP Language and Composition courses, because for the AP courses, we are following what College Board has suggested. And so those are the 3 buckets, and that's how the language applies in all 3 buckets.
Thank you so much. And while I could keep this conversation going for far past the extent of the patience of either staff or board, I'll let the rest of mine go. I only had one other question that I hadn't gotten an answer to, and that involved the portfolio expectations, which in all of the electives involves language about sophomore year. And then the standards are all 11-12 standards. And yet we've now opened, which is brand new, we've opened our electives to grade 10 students. So I didn't know if you or anyone else would be able to speak to how that's going to work with if a 10th grader takes an elective, how that would work, and how the wording of a 10th grade expectation, if it has grades 11 or 12 students in it, how that works.
So I'm hoping Julie Heller is on this call. That is a level of detail that I would have to ask Julie. She worked directly with teachers on that language. Julie, are you there?
I am, yes. So the portfolio expectations will absolutely match with the student and the grade level. Students have choice in terms of the pieces they will include in the portfolio. All of the writing standards are by a 9, 10, and 11, 12 band. So even if an elective includes 11, 12 writing standards and there's a 10th grade student in that particular class and they want to choose a piece from that class to include in their portfolio, they would be held to their grade level expectations.
So there would actually be different grading of a 10th grader versus an 11th or a 12th grader?
It's not about grading. It's more about having students work through the revision process, the entire writing process, and really bringing a piece to its best and fullest completion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Then I will take it to a roll call vote. I'm going to just go in order, and if you could please just vote. Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly.
Yes.
Mrs. Guernsey.
Mrs. Guernsey, yes.
Mr. Asa,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Rinaldi,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee, Mr. Krasnov,
That would be a yes.
Mrs. Flynn,
Yes.
Mrs. Jacobson is a yes. Mr. Lee, are you there?
Jen, he's raising his hand. And
Okay, I
giving
need
a
you
Jason,
to
can you
unmute.
come off? Can you come off mute and say yes for the vote if you're in favor?
He is off mute. For some reason, we can't hear him.
Or just
Jen,
type
he
yes
is
into the
giving-
chat
he
or
is-
something.
Yeah, he's giving the thumbs up, so he
Okay,
must have
Mr.
to
Lee
change
is
his
recorded as a
microphone.
yes. Okay, Mr. Lee is recorded as a yes vote. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Goss, on that and everyone's work
Thank you all.
and your patience.
Thank you.
Okay, approval to delete policy 4112.4-4212.4 health examination. Recommended motion that the Board of Education delete policy 4112.4-4212.4 health examination. Can I get a motion, please? Motion, Mr. Asa, seconded by Mrs. Flynn. Discussion? Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, do you want to discuss this briefly?
Sure. So this policy was brought to us by staff, and Ms. Ingram is on the call, I believe, so she can speak to it more specifically. But in looking at a variety of the measures of how to streamline the hiring process, this was one policy they landed on that would aid them in their process of streamlining, of not putting in some of these roadblocks, and also as a matter of consistency. Ms. Ingram did check with Jill Mitchell, did check with how the hiring practices for the town of Fairfield, which does not have these types of requirements. And thus they are looking to cease this immediately, which is why we are in the policy committee are looking for a one and done on this to end the practice that's outlined in this policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly. Are there any questions? Okay, we're going to take it to a roll call vote then, since this is a one and done. Mr. Krasnov?
Yes.
Mrs. Flynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Jacobson is a yes. Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Guernsey? Mr. Asa?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Rinaldi?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Mrs. Jacobson?
Yes?
I don't know if this matters. I just read the chat, and it seems that the agenda had the wrong meeting ID number. So callers aren't coming into the meeting directly, and that's why they think that there was no public comment individuals available. I don't know what we can do about that, but I didn't know if you saw the chat.
I did not see the chat.
Yeah, but just communicated with Nick McGarry directly, I just gave him the updated ID number. The other individual I could try to reach out to as well directly.
Okay, so Marco, when people come on for public comment, can you just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to accommodate them speaking if the ID number was incorrect. Thank you, Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, for letting me know that.
Will do.
Okay, next item, first reading of policy 6111, student calendar. Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, you want to introduce this?
Sure. So this is something that's been, in the wings for a year of our trying to resolve how we could adopt some type of process for future school calendar considerations. I'm very delighted Mrs. Jacobson had the genesis of the idea of, and that's what you'll see in this calendar, the idea of, rather than trying to get into the weeds of individual dates, because even when I queried the previous board on how do you come to make a calendar decision, sort of the overwhelming impression I had even at that time was, we know it when we see it. That's an oversimplification of what were very well explained philosophies, but it was very hard to create a procedure or a process around that. So the idea that we bring before you today for your consideration, and very, very open to feedback, was the idea of simply setting a firm earliest start date, a firm what could be the latest the school year could go, with a 5-day guaranteed buffer of snow days, and that each year any individual board is going to have to operate within those parameters for deciding holidays, or any of the other idiosyncrasies of the school calendar. Because what we know is we cannot just keep adding holidays and pushing into June for a variety of reasons, whether it's college orientation, whether it's summer camp employment, summer camp attendance, the fact that our buildings are not all, don't all have HVAC, and that students can be learning in very uncomfortable conditions. All of those speak against the notion of going late into June. And then in addition, we wanted those 5 snow day buffers because we don't overly relish the notion of taking days off in April. Not that we think that that should be necessarily the guaranteed time for doing so, but that certainly has been the practice. The one other thing which I would consider a significant change in practice is moving up the decision for when graduation will be decided. It used to be our April meeting, and moving that to March. We did not stipulate a first or a second meeting, simply because we don't always have 2 meetings in the month of March, so we simply left it that it would be in March. And those are some, again, while it looks kind of simple on paper, some very significant changes that we're asking for the board to consider and looking to get your feedback on. And so that's my intro.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
Jen, I'm not sure if you can see me. It's Nick. I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Asa.
There's a couple other people with hands raised too. To Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, just out of curiosity, with regard to setting the graduation date, I know there's been discussion about this for years, but what consideration was given to the idea, today is a perfect example, of the potential for a major storm after the meeting in March when it's decided? I don't know if April was done in the past because of potential snow in March and extending the year and whatnot. But I was just curious if you could touch on that and whether any members of the policy committee felt that the March could be problematic for set being firm on the graduation date.
Definitely. There's no question we knew that could end up being problematic. It's the community is always those parents of seniors are always begging for the earliest possible notification. And certainly both of our head principals were at the meeting where we finally made this decision, where they were saying, March, if at all possible, the more lead time we have would be great. But if this board decided emphatically, no, we can't take the risk, we need to go with April, I would certainly understand that. It's been April for years and with good reason. We just pushed it that bit earlier to March simply for the reasons that I just said. And nothing much more than that.
And
responsive to parents and administration.
Yeah, so it just, and I totally get that, and I assume that was probably it. So with regard to the parents, begging for that, I totally understand trying to plan well in advance. So just the notion would be, though, that when the graduation date is set, I see it's in there that it must be at least the 180th day. There is a chance that it could be pushed depending on a major snowstorm, and people would just have to deal with it then.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Asa, for kind of introing. I have a little bit of a question in the same vein. Was there any thought to making the language more inclusive? So instead of in March, by March, and obviously I'm sure there's a lot of past history on why April was, but has there been was there any discussion by the policy committee to leave it a little more open in case there was movement towards trying to get that decision earlier in the future? Just if there was any insight into that, just for the public.
I'm unclear on, Ms. Flynn, I'm sorry, I'm unclear on your question. You're looking to have
So
it
instead
earlier
of saying, oh, sorry. So in the language, it says that it shall be made in March. Was there any thought in saying by March? So it gives you like that lead time if they did want to back it up earlier than March?
So to that, I would say we did not discuss there. The only discussion aside from within March, we do have it in the power of policy and therefore in the board to set the graduation date 18 months ahead of time. We can just decide the graduation date, and that the date is what it is. I will say that I was emphatically against that. One, I think we have a procedure that people are used to, and while they're always, yearning to hear more quickly, it has worked. The head principals enumerated several issues with whenever a graduation date might not be on the final day. That idea that it could be during the final exam week, and you've got many family members who might need, who will be going to exams, having to study, being asked to work at the graduation. There are a lot of issues involved with having it during exam week. And so there wasn't a strong mood for wanting to become one of those districts that set, we did talk about it though, for setting it 18 months in advance. And if we're not going to pursue that route, we weren't interested in trying to, we did not talk about it a lot, but all of us saw the issue with trying to set it January, February, or anything like that, because we have had experience with March snow. So that would be my answer to that. So the main discussions were, do we dare move it to March? And are we interested in setting it 18 months earlier? And this is what we arrived at.
Thank you for indulging my question for me and for members of the public. It's appreciated.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, I don't see anyone. So this is a first read, so this will be on the next month's agenda for approval. Any follow-up questions, you can feel free to reach out to Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. Moving on to the next item, authorization for the BOE chair to execute Form SCG 042 for the Fairfield Woods Middle School, North Stratfield Elementary School, and Holland Hill Elementary School security vestibule projects. Recommended motion that the BOE chair be authorized to execute Form SCG 042 for the Fairfield Woods Middle School, North Stratfield Elementary School, and Holland Hill Elementary School security vestibule projects. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Krasnoff.
Question.
Mr. Lee, yes?
I'm looking this over. Should it say Osborne Hill, not Holland Hill Elementary School?
It should. Thank you for picking that up.
Okay. So, Mr. Lee, would you like to propose an amendment?
Yeah, so I'd like to propose amendment that it reads that the BOE chair be authorized to execute SCGO 42 for the Fairfield Woods Middle School, North Stratfield Elementary School, and Osborne Hill Elementary School's security vestibule projects.
Can I get a second, please? Mr. Asa, any discussion on the amendment and the amendment only? I don't see any hands up, so we will take the amendment to a vote, and I'm going to do the roll call again on the amendment to change it to Osborne Hill. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly?
Yes.
Guernsey?
Yes.
Mr. Asa?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
And if you call me, I'm a yes.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Rinaldi,
Yes.
Mr. Krasnoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Flynn,
Yes.
Mrs. Jacobson is a yes. Amendment passes 9-0. Back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Not seeing any. Take it back to a vote. Mr. Krasnoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Flynn,
Yes.
Mrs. Jacobson is a yes. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly,
Yes.
Mrs. Guernsey,
Yes.
Mr. Asa,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Rinaldi,
Yes.
and Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for catching that. Okay. Moving on to our next item, 2016-2028 Long Range Facilities Plan Review and Capital Planning. So for members of the public, this is available in our backup. It's also available as a link on our website. So just wanted to reintroduce this Long Range Facilities Plan book. It was last voted on and approved by the Board of Education in 2015. It's been updated several times. Primarily, I wanted to introduce this and familiarize our newer members to this plan as a separate item to our long range, to our waterfall and to our cash flow documents. I think that facilities is going to be taking this up along with central office staff in terms of updating this as we look forward to our capital planning workshop in the fall. And updating it, amending it, and bringing it back to the board several times for feedback and input, public comment, etc. as we proceed on that. But just wanted to open this up to the full board in terms of just remembering kind of what's in here, what it includes, and offer the opportunity for some discussion around the updates to this plan, what should be in it, not in it, etc. as the facilities committee we'll start to work on updating this item before bringing it back to the board, probably in June for a vote, just so that central office also has time over the summer to work on the waterfall and our cash flow documents for August and September before we go before the Board of Finance for the capital planning workshop. So that's kind of an introduction to this. I'm happy to hear anyone's thoughts on this as it stands. I have several questions that I'd like to ask board members on, but I will open this up to the floor if anyone has any thoughts or questions. Mrs. Flynn.
Thank you. Just a few quick questions. When I'm looking at the needs piece for each building, can anyone speak to where playgrounds or outdoor spaces, fields, any of those needs are located? I just don't see them, especially for the elementary schools. Like, I know they're on our waterfall. Was that also included on this needs part of the assessment?
Angeles, do you want to speak? Mr. Papa George, do you want to speak to that?
I can. They were not included in the 10-year facilities plan because we have existing playgrounds, but we do conduct our inspections and update them as needed throughout the district. They were not included in the plan. However, it's something we could definitely look at including moving forwards.
And would you say the same for field space for our high schools, for things like that? Where are we including that information?
So the fields, like the turf fields, those are done on the recommendation of the field manufacturing companies, how often they should be replaced. Our other fields are just maintained throughout the district from our contractors. We've never looked at increasing field space because there's really no room for us to grow outside of the school grounds.
So in terms of deficiencies, we're not including outdoor spaces in that kind of needs assessment profile, I guess you could say.
No, we do. So we look at the fields every year with our contractors. We meet almost every other week with Parks and Rec as well with the contractors. We go over any deficiencies. We discuss plans and what we're going to do to improve them. If it's going to be a larger project, then we bring it back and we put it onto the waterfall or into the budget as an operating large project.
Okay, I think that may be something worth looking at incorporating into the document for the facilities committee. And then just one other, this is kind of more of a statement, but kind of looking at, our buildings that are incorporated into this document that have not been updated, the Holland Hills, the River Fields, the Mill Hills. And then looking at what we have left to do and how the deficient spaces are listed, and kind of just how the facilities committee is going to think about, are those going to be listed building by building in totality? Obviously now, even in the past 5 years, we're really looking at buildings that are being planned for, our K through 5 programmatics, but also our special programming and our pre-Kers. So I think it's, when you're talking about our, what's been commonly coined, I think, our ed specs, how we're looking at those spaces and in what capacity. So those are just my quick thoughts off the top, but I'm sure I'll have more questions when other board members start chiming in.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Flynn. I'll rely on my board members to help me out if anyone else has their hand up.
Jen, I've got one question.
Sure, Mrs. Maxon-Canale, sorry, I couldn't see you.
No, that's okay. As we are, and again, I assume this is the facilities committee working with staff, but can we trust that there's going to be, that as part of this, an academic evaluation of, it's one thing to always think historically that you need something as a space, but if in fact recent building projects have shown, no, actually that's not something that we would consider to be a deficiency, and again, I'm not saying I have something in mind, but suddenly we're thinking art on a card is a great idea. Obviously, I'm picking a ridiculous example, but if there's a different way to meet something that they would envision going forward, it would mean that not every building is the same, but that's considered an improvement. So all I'm asking is will that be part of the facility discussion and the analysis? It's not just well, they have it, so we have to have it kind of rationale.
I mean, I certainly can't speak for anyone else on the facilities committee. I mean, I share your thoughts in terms of, where we've been in the past isn't necessarily where we think we're going to go in the future. And the introductory letter, I did notice that building level administrators, at least, were included in kind of the discussion around this back in 2015. I wasn't on the board then, but I know personally, I'd be interested in hearing from administrators or even teachers about what is what are our current needs? What are they looking at? There are deficiencies listed in here. Are these the best ways to continue that, or should it be changed going forward? So I know that I definitely would be interested in hearing from building level and central office staff as well about the changing evolution of our student population, their needs, just how they think spaces are best utilized, multi-purposed, shared, etc. As what you're calling this academic exercise. So in my mind, the answer is yes, but certainly open to other people's thoughts on that if anyone else had a comment. Just going through the tours as well, Mrs. Maxon-Canale, for all of us that recently went through the tours, I can definitely see a change in how some spaces are being used and what they've been used in the past. So I just think it's notable and would be a reconciliation process in the editing of this document as we go forward. So yeah. Good question. I had a thought. This current plan, and I certainly appreciate this, had not only the deficiencies or what each building needs going forward over a 10, 11-year time frame, but it also had the costs associated that are obviously not accurate anymore in terms of the future projects when it was passed. So I'm wondering if board members have any input on, should this document be like a pure statement of need in terms of what we're anticipating and leave the timing and the dollars to the waterfall and the cash flow? Because those change, you get better numbers, things change over time. Once you vote on this, it's like kind of a locked thing. So I'm vacillating on that idea, but I'm wondering what other board members, in keeping this kind of the building by building needs, and leaving the timing and the dollars to the waterfall and cash flow. Mr. Asa, hand up.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, I agree with that statement. I believe that this document is a long-term facility needs. For us to put dollars or even think about dates or dollars to this, I think would be a mistake. I think we should continue in the vein in which it was originally done. However, much improve upon based on some of the things that have been said tonight, just what we're looking at and how the document reads. But I would fully support keeping it as is structure-wise, and leaving the dollars and the dates to the waterfall, the live document, as we always have.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? And I can't see everyone, so feel free to use your emoji or.
David is raising his hand.
Okay, Mr. Krasnov.
Sorry. Thank you, Nick. So I agree with that. We noticed from this current document, a lot of the dates and prices have changed. I would hate to see us lock in something that we couldn't fulfill and as a board achieve. So keeping it a little bit more open, I think would be great. In addition, I would love to see the addition of some projects outside of buildings. For example, we know Dwight's septic has been a little bit of concern. Stuff like that, I think needs to be added to this document. And we also, in the facilities, did discuss some things that we learned in the past have not worked. And it might be a good place to note some things that we've tried and maybe weren't great. Just so for future boards to know, and don't go back and try to redo mistakes that prior boards had done.
Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly.
Through the chair to Mr. Krasnov, can you give an example of that? I'm not sure what, I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. Like what would be an example of something you think that should be included for future boards to learn from?
Like design space of buildings. You know, we've tried to get a little creative and fancy in certain buildings in town at a cost of usage and, you know, optimization. And if we learn from mistakes like that, not to say that any of our buildings are true mistakes, but if we learn to optimize going forward, I think it would be a good lesson for any future board to know.
So an example of something that was kind of a nice to have and ended up backfiring sort of thing.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So I will just put my 2 cents in. I agree with Mr. Krasnov and Mr. Ada that, you know, no dates, no times. The one thing that with dates that I think is helpful is the end of the document where it goes year by year on what work was done. I think that's very helpful to have as a historical look backwards, however. That I do think was helpful. I worry about putting things in there that aren't, you know, true facility, you know, this is what we're doing for an equitable, you know, academic experience. So I'll be curious to hear what people are interested beyond the types of items that are in there now. And the only other thing that I would ask is that the facility planning principles be reconsidered at the start of this, because obviously that 2010 document is something that we have referenced multiple times since then. So I'm not quite sure how part of this process whether we have to bring that up as a separate voting or amendment process, but to include something from 2010 that we keep criticizing, I think is a mistake.
So Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, just a reminder, we updated those in December of 2022 during the redistricting process. So those would be substituted out for the 2010 version.
And that's what I wasn't positive of. If there was something about this separate, that it would belong in this document. So thank you for confirming that that would not be the case.
Yeah, it would just be the updated ones. Mrs. Flynn. You're muted. You're muted. Katie, you're muted.
Sorry. I think this is just piggybacking off of Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly and Mr. Krasnov's points, but I think it would be helpful for the Facilities Committee and new board members and any board members to possibly see tours of our newer buildings. I think when we look at the long-range waterfall and how those buildings were crafted, especially in terms of our smaller spaces. I think it could just be helpful to see, building by building, how those are being utilized and, moving forward. Similar to Mr. Krasnoff's point, I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's something working better and more efficient that we can model moving forward. So our new builds may be just as vital to see as our buildings most in need.
So those would be that we haven't already seen would be
Riverfield, Mill Hill, and Holland. We saw Holland Hill.
Well, we just did Holland Hill.
Riverfield and Mill Hill.
Okay. I'm going to go to Mr. Lee.
I just want to answer Mrs. Maxon Kennelly's original thing about having school administrators involved. I think the building committees I've been involved in, they've always had an input, especially when you're about to go to design. They've always been a part of that. I think asking them now it's too early because just like prices, things can change by the time they get to their project. Once that project's we get there, those building administrators, the principals and such are always involved in designing, or they have a big say on spacing in their schools.
So I just want to piggyback on that. So just for timing, we can talk about that. We're going to be bringing this forward in June, hopefully, to everyone. So at somewhere in the time, I think it would be helpful just to get some initial thoughts from some of the administrators and what they're thinking about. Since the designs piece, Mr. Lee, won't happen until much later. So just to get some, as we update the deficiencies, right? Or the 0.25s, the 0.5s, the 1.0s, should that change in any way or remain the same? Mr. Krasnoff.
I was just going to say, I would actually love to learn from the administrators of what each of them has found has been really successful and what is not. They're the ones that live in these spaces. They're the ones that are going to have to live and use these spaces. So because this is, again, a living document and not necessarily for one specific project, I would love to know overall what their opinion was, which is my feeling of it.
Okay. Any last thoughts?
Mrs. Jacobson?
Sure. Mrs. Maxine-Kennelly?
Mrs. Jacobson?
Mrs. Maxine-Kennelly.
To the point Mr. Krasnoff. Yeah, can you hear me? Just to the point Mr. Krasnoff just raised, this document is not what we would consider to be a living document, though. I want to make sure I'm correct. Like, this document, we're going to capture a snapshot right now and then move forward with that. So that's why, we like the dates and the money on the waterfall. That's the living document. This hasn't been changed. I mean, there's reference to dates and when building committees have come together, and yet then you still see those needs, those deficiencies. So, there's that. But I would just, the only thing I'd want to push, because I really would like to trust this to the facility committee. A lot of this initial groundwork, I don't think the full board should be, unless they want to, I guess, doing a lot of that groundwork. That's the point of having a facilities committee, is to do that for us. And I would just ask the facility committee to push administrators as much on what do they want, as well as what could they do without, because it's easy to start compiling the wish list, but the notion of having to do, but this is something we haven't needed as much. You gave us this much office space, you gave us 3 cafeteria lines, we really only need 2. Again, I'm just making things up, but I just would want, a real get down to what do we need, and we can always try to find, new things that are going to work. I'll just leave that there, but I really do hope that we can empower the facilities committee to do a lot of this work for us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Krasnoff.
I just wanted to respond to that. When I said a living document, I meant it's a 10-year document we're going to all have to live with. Not that it's necessarily going to be changed on a regular basis. And then in addition to Mrs. Flynn's request, I would actually love to see McKinley as well.
Okay. we can try and set up some additional tours. All right, so thanks everyone for your input. Very helpful. Just so we have it outlined going forward. Again, we're backing up from the capital planning workshop that's set in September. That might change, but the idea is that this would come for a vote to the board in June at some point, hopefully, so that again, central office has time over the summer to work on that the implications for the waterfall and the cash flow. And again, I would hope that this would come back to the board at least a couple more times before June, just to say give status update, where are we at, what are things looking like, do we have some choke points, do we need more clarification from the board or the public, just to make sure we don't go too far down any pathways that might not be amenable to the boards. So that would be the thinking on this, to make sure we have at least a couple more checkpoints. Sound good, everybody? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our next item. First reading of technology education curriculum, Computer Assisted Design 2. Dr. Zavajanzik, are you on?
Good. I am here.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody. Hey there. James Zavajanzik, Chief Academic Officer. There's not a presentation for this first read this evening. Just to give background on it, back in November of 2023, you may remember the full technology education curriculum came before you for both the first read and a subsequent vote. In that packet was the CAD 2 course. Unfortunately, it was in error when the packet was being put together. So in your packet tonight is the corrected version that is redlined from the version that was seen in November with the updates. It mainly went from a half-year duration, which you'll see in the former one, to a full-year course, along with some changes in standards, skills, and content. So we are asking the board to review the CAD 2 as a first read and at this time for next year's program of study. Thank you.
Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly.
Yeah, thank you for that. So a couple of questions. First, I'm wondering how are our enrollment numbers? And I did not submit these ahead of time, so okay if you can't answer them, but how are our enrollment numbers in all 4 levels of CAD at this time? Or historically?
Well, I don't have that information with me today. I can pull the document from the November meeting and get that to you for Friday's packet.
Okay, that's fine. And one of the things I was wondering about is there a need for half-year options in this field? Because this is a pretty amazing curriculum. And so I was wondering about that.
So the department has been discussing that. Right now, the curriculum, we do put a duration in it at this point, so they're all full-year courses. The tech ed department does have some work to do in articulating what it would look like as a half-year option if it were nested in the full year. We are not ready to present that yet, but it is ongoing work with the department that we are doing.
Can I ask a follow-up, Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly?
Sure.
Currently, in the program of studies for this year and previous years, CAD 2, 3, and 4 are listed as being both available as a 1 year and a 0.5. So one is a full year, but the other 2 is listed as being optional for both. I went back to the November documents where you had the T-chart that we were provided, what the changes were, and for the CAD courses, it did not indicate that that was being changed when it was presented to the board. So my question on following up to Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly's question on the 0.5s is it currently is offered at a 0.5 in our program of studies, and why would we be looking to take that option away?
So that is accurate. Right now, all of the CAD courses have an option for 0.5 and a 1.0. I wasn't here, but when the last curriculum review went through, duration and course credit was not part of the package that we presented. That was a shift in how we do curriculum at this point and submit it to you. And we say what the course will be that we're offering. What has been offered so far in terms of the curriculum writing is 1.0. How that looks as a 0.5 credit has not been determined. So just to go backwards, curriculum was was approved for CAD, and then the administration decided how it was implemented. So 0.5 was allowed and 1.0 was allowed. We did shift based on feedback to add that into the document explicitly of what this curriculum would be moving forward, and only a 1.0 course has been written for your approval at this point.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand, and maybe this is the question for, in between tonight and the vote, but I'm looking to understand why we would take the 0.5 option away.
There's currently not a curriculum written for a 0.5 option.
But
So-
but they were offered it in this program of studies?
In the past, the curriculum was written broadly and implemented based on the administration. It was written as it was written in the program of studies as a 1.0 and a 0.5. So students entered either in the fall or in the spring, and they picked up wherever they were with the teacher.
And would that not be possible with the new?
The documents right now that were voted on are 1.0 credits. If this board is saying we have administrative approval to alter what has been approved at this point, we can do that. Otherwise, we would bring forward a 0.50 credit or a semester credit course.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions?
Yes, my hand's raised.
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Guernsey?
I was actually really surprised to understand that these were only offered as 1-year credits. There's also obviously the mistake in the current program of studies where we have the CAD 2 being 0.5 credits, and I don't know if that's accurate, not accurate, what we voted on. I know that when this was presented, it was not made clear to me that these were going to be 1 credit courses only. It's not in the T chart. I mean, I looked through the handouts. I went back to November meeting. This is providing less options for our students. We know they're having trouble filling their STEM credits. So I'm frustrated by that. And we also know that we're going to have a lot of difficulty with these additional course like financial literacy and other courses that we're trying to get into our student schedules. So this is not helpful. I'm kind of astounded to see that it's not in our program of studies when, I'm looking at the one from the program of studies from 2023, 2024, and it's offered as 1, just to reiterate, 1 credit, full credit, and then there's a half credit. So I'm just really frustrated with this. I would absolutely want to see this changed for next time when we vote on this. And what my concern is that the course schedules for our students were due yesterday. So I don't really know how we fix this for those students because many of them might be looking for 0.5 classes to balance out that financial literacy. So I just, this is like a pretty enormous problem and we have a very short amount of time to fix it. So I'd love to hear how this is going to be.
So if I could respond, it is accurately in the program of studies now because the 0.5 credit was what was approved in November. So the 1.0 and the 0.5 was in there. So that is currently accurate. The documents that were submitted in November, all except for CAD 2, stated a 1.0, which is what were approved.
Yeah, I think it's fair to the board when we're presented documents and it specifies specific T-chart changes, and that was not indicated. I assumed that they would still be available at the 4.5 credits. So this is just it's either a huge communication problem or, it's also a mistake. I don't know how this gets fixed, but this is a real disservice to our students.
Mr. Testani, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, to your question about, or the question about enrollment in the semester CAD courses at Ludlow, there are currently no students enrolled in any of the semester offerings. The 0.5s just in the full year. And at Fairfield Ward High School, between 2, 3, and 4 CAD, the semester courses, there's about 10 kids enrolled total. And all the rest are enrolled in the full year courses. So that was the question that was asked. So I just pulled it up on my, on Infinity Campus.
Anyone else have a question on this? Okay. All right, so this will come back to us for vote at our next meeting. Moving on to the first reading of World Language Curriculum, Introduction to Cultures and Communication. Again, Dr. Zavajancic, you want to go ahead and introduce this one? Or I don't know if there's a presentation that is in the backup as well.
There is a presentation in the backup, and Ms. Frankel is here with us this evening. She's our World Language Coordinator, who is going to be walking you through that presentation. The curriculum also lies in the backup. So I will share my screen for you, and Ms. Frankel will go through
it. Good evening. My name is Eileen Frankel. I am the World Language Coordinator for the district, grades 3 through 12, and I teach 2 level 6 Spanish classes at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I am here tonight to present the Introduction to Cultures and Communication course, which requires board approval in order to be offered to students in the 2024-25 school year. I would like to thank the board and the central office administration for allowing this presentation to occur tonight. Let me begin by thanking Rose Healy, who, in addition to teaching Mandarin in the district for many years, has been instrumental in developing the curriculum and resources for this course. I would also like to thank Kimberly Smith for her insight and work on the course as well. The course is offered at our 3 high schools, Fairfield Ludlow, Fairfield Ward, and Walter Fitzgerald. The purpose and vision of the Intro to Cultures and Communication are directly aligned to the World Language Department goal to prepare students, and I will quote, to communicate effectively and to interact with cultural competence in multilingual communities at home and around the world, unquote. Effective communication goes far beyond the spoken word and includes an understanding of what is known in the world language community as the 3 Ps, cultural products, practices, and perspectives. It also focuses on the 3 modes of communication: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. This course centers on the development of cultural knowledge and intercultural competence, which is exceedingly more important in our ever-changing global society. It offers the opportunity for learners to develop the tools necessary to demonstrate an awareness and respect for others, accepting the other's right to be different or similar. The course fulfills the state requirement for graduation of 1 credit in world language. It can also count toward the humanities requirement as well as the elective requirement. The course is aligned to the Fairfield Public Schools mission, goals, and vision of a graduate. It is also aligned to the actual intercultural can-do statements, which focus on the investigation of products and practices to understand cultural perspectives and the interaction with others in and from other cultures. The unit of study are directly aligned to the National World Language Goal areas, the 5 Cs, communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities, and the 2015 World Readiness Standards associated with the goal areas. The course maintains engaging themes and essential questions as the vehicle to develop the content and skills outlined for the course. The learning expectations for all of our courses are aligned to national standards and are reflective of Fairfield's mission, goals, and vision of a graduate. As stated in the educational goals of the Fairfield Public Schools, students will, and again I quote, acquire an understanding and appreciation of other cultures and will understand international issues and demonstrate the skills needed to participate in a global society, unquote. Emphasis is placed on interculturality, which is defined by the National Council for State Supervisors for Languages as, and again I quote, the interaction of people from different cultural backgrounds and the ability to experience the culture of another person and to be open-minded, interested, and curious about that person and culture. Language learners must be able to evaluate personal feelings, thoughts, perceptions, and reactions in order to understand another culture and use that experience to reflect on their own life and surroundings, unquote. By examining in depth the 3 Ps, the products, practices, and perspectives of different cultures, this course analyzes the interaction of people from different cultures and the understanding of other cultures, probing how people feel, think, and react. Let me end by sharing with you some student comments regarding their experience in the course. I am reading the quotes as they are written, so there are some grammatical errors. Because I took Latin last year, and I don't have any prior experiences with French or Spanish, so why not get another language credit and go for something like this? As well, I like learning about the world. I learned about many cultures, such as Chinese, African, Latino, and really understand them, and that we are all one, maybe different cultures, but still human. I went into this class thinking I would hate it, but it ended up being such a fun class to understand different cultural philosophies in our world, and I love that this course applies to the real world. I've learned that not all cultures are the same, and every culture has its own unique characteristics and traditions. I learned a ton about different cultures and the comparisons with my own culture, and how they are different or might be the same as each other, and what people do to celebrate big festivals, and how they might or might not be similar to the ones that we do, and how other people could think that they are the same as them as well. There are no additional costs for moving this curriculum forward. The anticipated FTE remains at 0.6, 1 section at each of the 3 high schools. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation and for being with us here this evening. I will open this up to the board for questions.
Jen?
Sorry, yeah, Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly?
Yeah, so one question I had, and this is kind of similar to what I'd been asking during ELA. With this course being offered in 3 different schools, what assurance do you have of consistency, for example, of any particular cultures being studied? I mean, the curriculum document, which again poses some interesting questions, and I have no doubt that those comments kind of jibe with what I would expect or hope students taking this course would say, but there's nothing that's assured in terms of what cultures they will be studying. And that means 3 very different experiences across the 3 schools. And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, to begin with, we would have assured experiences in terms of a final assessment or some midway assessments along the pathway to completing each unit. The essential questions would certainly guide the students and the teachers. And then again, just opening up to one of the units, we'd be looking at cultural features, food, music, clothing, and family traditions, intangible elements, ideas, perspectives, beliefs, and superstitions. And hoping honestly that considering that we're trying to make this an engaging process, there would be student voice in it. And so just quoting from Move This World, which is a program that we've purchased, one of the quotes that they have on their website is talking about student-centered classrooms that prioritize both student voice and choice, including opportunities for students to explore their interests and define who they are while applying some of those learnings to being supported through decision-making with choices. So there would be some flexibility as to what particular cultures might be studied depending on the students that are there, but certainly the content would direct what the teachers are teaching.
Okay, except that I hear what you're saying about some of the assured experiences, but you're not talking about some student choice. The only thing you've referenced would be all student choice, and there is no assured content in terms of our knowing that our students have had a study of, and actually, I find it a little disheartening that a student referenced African culture when you think of all the countries in Africa, and that if a student is thinking that there is one African culture, that to me would be an aspect of that course which didn't reach its intended goal. That would be like saying that all Hispanic culture is the same, which is, of course, a fallacy. And so you're still leaving it as any individual teacher can choose, or the students are completely behind the wheel, which means, again, that we have 3 high schools offering the same course and 3 completely different experiences with no assured content in terms of culture studied. And that's what I'm asking about.
I understand that. Again, when we wrote the curriculum and we looked at it last week again, the thinking was that it would be more the ideas rather than the specific cultures.
Well, say, for example, you started with a foundational culture, and I'm not looking to pick it. But if, for example, you were to say, we're going to start with the culture of Cuba, and let's set the ground. What do we mean when we're talking about the arts of Cuba, the music of Cuba, the dance, the food, the cultural norms, the behaviors, the, whatever are the unwritten rules? Why wouldn't we start with 1 or 2 cultures, establish that foundation, and then let choice grow from there? That, again, right now you're going to have 3 completely different experiences at the 3 different high schools. And that does not feel appropriate given recent conversation at the board surrounding grading and surrounding curricula. So I will leave that there.
Mrs. Guernsey?
Yeah, could you speak more to the type of student that's taking this course? Because I'm just trying to understand if the interest in this course is based on like access to a world language, and if students are using this for their language requirement, or like you described in the quotes from students, hey, I already took Latin and now I'm taking this because it's a fantastic elective. And that being said, just wanted to share that this course has fantastic feedback from our students. They love it. It's a fantastic course. But what I don't understand is the language, like meeting the language, the criteria for our world language requirement for graduation, how and why that's being met by this course, and again, what the profile of the student that's taking this course, and what is the intention of the profile of the student, if that makes sense. Who is the intended target audience for this course, and who actually is taking it? And it could be one and the same.
There are students who need it for graduation. There are other students who have taken it and then take something else afterwards. And there are students like the Latin student who mentioned Latin, who took another language and then decided to do this. So it really does meet a lot of different needs and a large audience.
Can I follow up, Mrs. Guernsey, on that? Do you mind? Thank you. This absolutely sounds like a lovely, lovely course as it's described to us. However, I have a similar question. You stated that this course fulfills a graduation requirement for world language. I heard a lot about cultures, perspectives, international relations, things like that. And in researching the graduation requirement under the statutes in terms of meeting the world language requirement, CSDE does state that to meet the world language requirement, it needs to be in any language other than English, including ASL. So do we know, have we verified that this actually, like I understand taking Latin or Spanish plus this, where you're still getting the something other than English part done. I'm not sure I understand this being in lieu of a world language and meeting the graduation requirement. So just can we confirm that this was approved through CSDE to meet the world language requirement? I don't know who wants to answer that.
I've not done an approval if you're asking me.
Well, I just thought
That
maybe
meets
it goes to Mrs.
requirement,
Frankel.
so.
She mentioned that it does meet graduation requirement for world language. So just want to look that we've confirmed that.
Madam Chair, it has not been confirmed, and under the guidelines of the State Department of Ed, it will not meet the requirements to suffice a 1 credit of a foreign language for graduation. I would not even broach it with the State Department of Ed. Just from my experience,
Wow.
if it is not taught in another language, including ASL, it will not qualify as a foreign language graduation requirement course.
Okay, so this would be meeting the graduation requirement, not necessarily for world language, but as an elective or an additional world language. Not even, so can we call this world language then, or does this belong in a different, sorry, I guess I'm just confused, not about the wonderfulness of the course or the work that's gone into it, but what department it's sitting in, and is this constitute a world language course or not? So that might not be for tonight or right now, won't come back to us for a while. So maybe that's something, that's just follow-up questions that I may have on this particular course. Wait, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, before I go to you, I don't know if Mrs. Frankel or anyone had any response to that. No? Okay. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Jen, hold on real quick, just so you know, Jen, I'm not sure if you see for after Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, David and Katie have their hands up in the chat.
Thank you for your help. Thank you.
Well, I hate to say this, but given what, and Mr. Testani, thank you for speaking to that so definitively. Have we had a student graduate only having taken this course?
I'm going to venture to say yes.
So, I mean, again, and obviously this course is one that has been offered for a few years now that never even got board approval. So we knew it was in the works, but so that's problematic, obviously, on a few levels. Thank you.
There are currently 16 students enrolled in one section at Fairfield Ward High School, and I believe I can double check again, 15 students enrolled in one section at Fairfield Ludlow. And I have not checked Walter Fitzgerald yet, but I'm sure it's smaller number, obviously, given the enrollment at the school. So,
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Krasnov?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I think I'm heading on here. Do have a question about the culture piece for you. I know typically, and when you take Spanish, when you take French, when you take most foreign languages, there is a culture piece embedded in those specific languages. How would this course differ? Is it going to be a little repetitive for some of those that have already maybe experienced some of the Spanish culture? And that's kind of my concern, to piggyback off Ms. Max Kennelly. Without knowing specifically what cultures are going to be covered, one, I don't necessarily feel comfortable having a kid take it that isn't necessarily aware of what they're going to learn there. And two, I would like semi-consistent experience that we know what's being shared, because there's tons of cultures out there that I think we all should learn about, but we need to kind of understand what cultures are really being taught in this course. Thank you.
I'm looking for hands.
Jason.
Oh, hi. Hi, Mr. Lee, go ahead.
I think Mrs. Flynn is next, or she's waiting.
Her hand is down now in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Testani touched on this, but to staff, it might be a good idea for us. Obviously, there's, I think it was 16 students at Fairfield Ward, 15 at Ludlow, and assorted amount at Walter Fitz, but that doesn't really capture the students that may have taken it in prior years. So I would just want to make sure that as we're looking at this kind of working backwards, that if there are students that either took this course with the under the assumption that it was meeting their world language requirement and now are going to be in a different situation, that we're getting ahead of that. It's just a little concerning to hear that we most likely have advanced students that didn't meet requirements. So just wanted to maybe ask a firm request to get the number of students that are currently registered so that we can be aware.
if I can also add, I do have a question. I thought this course, underclassmen, freshman, sophomore cannot take it, that it was only meant for upperclassmen once they fulfilled a foreign language, whether for their college requirement or towards their graduation. So if you have a student that takes Spanish for 2 years and it meets like to college, this course actually does fulfill the foreign language part without taking Spanish 3 or Spanish 4. But I didn't think freshman or sophomore could take it, which is why I'm surprised that you said people would take it before they take a foreign language. Can you clarify that?
So just to clarify, to clarify, it's open to grades 9 through 12, Mr. Lee. In the curriculum document and in the program instead.
It's open.
Yeah, there's roughly currently about half are in grades 9 and 10 at both schools and half in grades 11 and 12.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All right,
Yeah.
looks like
Oh, Jen. Oh, can I go?
Yes, Mr. Yes.
So I'm going to just say the ugly thing out loud. I just want to know how many seniors are planning to graduate using this as their world language requirement. If we made a mistake, how are we going to help to make sure that they graduate?
Well, right now at Ward, there are 5 seniors. We'd have to go back and look at all 5 seniors to make sure they had another language in previous years that they received credit for. And I believe the number at Ludlow currently, just double check, let me switch my screen, is 2. So there's 7 children total that currently are in 12th grade. We'd have to go back and have the counselors look at whether they received any other credits in the previous 3 years or in middle school for foreign language.
Right, but we're not capturing students that took this class in grades 9, 10, or 11.
Correct.
That need to use this. So the question isn't just about who's taking the class now, just to clarify, and then quickly determining how we're going to help make sure that we can bring these kids across the finish line.
Hey, we're running out of time because if you're talking about seniors, this is their second semester. When are they going to be able to make it up?
So let's get some information, let's follow up. Let's look at the middle schools as well, because students can also carry forward their foreign language, world language credits from middle school as well. So sounds like there might be some follow-up information that the board would like to receive and get some answers to some of these questions before we revisit this next time. Does that sound like a plan and okay with everyone? Yep. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, Mrs. Franklin, for being with us on this snowy day, evening, night. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, approval of minutes. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the following minutes: January 16th, 2024 BOE special meeting minutes, the January 23rd, 2024 BOE special meeting minutes, and the January 25th, 2024 BOE regular meeting minutes. Can I get a motion, please? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Krasnov. Any discussion? Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. All right, hold on. I have to pull
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, so I have one small amendment, but hold on. Let me pull it up on my screen. So this is to the January 25th minutes on page 9. It's about 8 lines down under adoption of recommended budget. And I move to amend the word addendums to be amendments.
Hey, Jen Jacobson, you're muted. We couldn't hear you.
Second, please. Mrs. Guernsey, any discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I can't
More
find
important.
it I don't even know where you're looking. Which
It's
page?
January 25th, it's Thursday, January 25th, page 9, about 8 lines down from the top of the page, under adoption of recommended budget.
Give me 1 second. I got a lot of pages I'm going through.
That's, I get it.
Oh, I see. This is in reference to the superintendent's requested amendments that the superintendent brought forth. And right now the minutes read addendums instead of amendments, Mr. Krasnoff, just to clarify.
I see it now. I'm good. Yes.
Okay. Okay. If there's no discussion, everyone has voted already. David, did you vote? All good? Okay.
Yes, I voted
Any
yes.
opposed? All right. Any opposed? None. All right. Motion passes 9-0. Thank you, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Back to the motion as amended for the minutes. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Superintendent's report.
Thank you. I have
Mr.
just a
Tristani.
couple of things that I'd like to just acknowledge. Number one, as we continue through February and throughout the year, Fairfield students and educators and community members pay tribute during the month of Black History to the achievements, struggles, and impact of generations of Black Americans by learning about critical roles and accomplishments throughout our country's history. Students across the district highlight Black History Month by discussing and learning about subjects such as historical figures, leaders, inventors, educators, landmark legal decisions, school integration, and civil rights. We celebrated last week the 100th day of school, and many of our classrooms did a number of activities to mark the 100th day of school. I do want to acknowledge one of the activities done at Riverfield School was the domino run, and students and staff collected over 600 cereal boxes for Operation Hope and Nourish Bridgeport and set up an exciting domino run with multiple twists and turns throughout the hallways. Holocaust Remembrance Day, in honor of that, Fairfield Ward students were given the opportunity to listen to a Holocaust survivor, Mr. Andy Sarkany, who shared his story. He described his experiences living inside the Budapest ghetto, followed by his life under the brutal Soviet regime in Hungary, and how he eventually found a home here in the United States. It was a powerful lecture which provided students to learn about important historical events and the impact on those who lived through it. I think I mentioned this last time and last week. Our Fairfield Public Schools Music Department welcomed 25 French student musicians in an exchange program. The program provided an immersive cultural experience for both the French students and their American host families. Students connected with those individuals through customs, life experiences, fostering an understanding and acceptance, and it culminated with a concert. And I know Mrs. Guernsey hosted one of the exchange students. I don't know if you want to mention anything about your experience, Mrs. Guernsey, before I move on, but I'd love to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. We hosted an 18-year-old boy from France who was actually also British. So that was sort of a twist, a French-British exchange student. And we learned so much from him. He was an absolute joy to have at our house, and, hope that he's going to come back again to visit us soon.
Great, thank you. Last week was National School Counselors Week, and the entire Fairfield Public Schools community would like to express our gratitude to all our school counselors for their dedication and support in guiding our students. I'm going to give some information. I just wanted to highlight that, and then it'll lead into something in a minute. I do want to recognize both our Ludlow girls and boys basketball coaches. Last month earned their 100th win. So just a big shout out to Sarah Kinsley and John Daly for their commitment and dedication and their success at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I also wanted to just mention briefly, as we talked about the counselors, EdSite has released a new component, which will allow districts and the public to look at how they rank with other school districts in terms of the ratio of their support staff to the state and also other school districts. So currently, just to give everyone a little bit of information, in terms of certified school counselors, we currently, in total, our ratio is one counselor to 336. This is 22-23 data. The state average is one for every 333, so we're pretty much in line. However, the state breaks it down by total because some school districts do have counselors in the elementary, middle schools. The elementary schools, not just the high school, the secondary. So in there, in terms of the high schools, we lag a little behind. State average is one counselor for every 179 students. In terms of school psychologists, we have one school psychologist for every 413 students. That is below the average of the state, which is one for every 494. However, social workers, we lag behind. We have one social worker for every 449 students, where the state average is one for every 384. So we're a little bit behind in social work services caseloads. And school nurses, we're behind as well. We have one school nurse for every 415 students, where the state average is one school nurse for every 365. So just some data that I was looking through. I'm going to start doing some comparisons and breaking it down by districts that have similar size number of students in their district. But it's just a new thing that they rolled out about a week and a half ago. So just getting through that as we start to look at our mental health support staffing as we move forward in the future. And last but not least, as you're all aware, we are going up on March 6th. We go in front of the state board regarding our racial imbalance plan. I did verify we will be going up as well as Greenwich on the same day, and we will be going first on the agenda. We will be preparing next week, myself, Mrs. Jacobson, Mr. Asa, with the help of Attorney Tom Mooney for the visit up on March 6th. Any questions?
Is that meeting televised?
I believe the state board meetings are televised, yes.
They typically are, yes.
Yeah.
I think it would be incredibly helpful if we put a blast out to parents and to the Fairfield community, not just the board, about how to be able to watch that and keep informed on this issue, because there are going to be so many questions after the fact, and how much better it will be if people watch it firsthand themselves.
Great idea. We'll do that. We also plan on hosting, just to hear from the McKinley School community, town hall community conversation at McKinley School on February 26th, Monday at 6:30 p.m. I've confirmed that with the principal and the PTA president. So they're going to organize that there. Mrs. Jacobson and I plan on attending. I don't know if Mr. Asa is going to join. No, we don't want to get too many board members there to have a quorum, but just wanted to do a check-in with the McKinley community just to see how they're feeling, what they're thinking. If anything's changed in their thought process on the whole racial imbalance and some of the things that were explored last year in terms of how we can resolve that. If anyone has some different thoughts or ideas from the McKinley community. So I'd give them an opportunity. I think that would be helpful as we go up on March 6th to be able to speak to more recent information that was shared rather than things that were shared last summer and early fall.
And then, of course, we will be following up in March with our own town hall. So thank you to everyone for getting the date. So we will finalize in March when we will be having a community town hall after that meeting. So thank you, Mr. Testani, for your update. All right, committee liaison reports. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, you want to go first?
Well, I didn't have my hand up, but I'm happy to. Or maybe that's an old hand. So policy is taking up class size and trying to take a look and find our way forward on that. And then the other one, again, which the board keeps hearing about, is grading policy. Very, very appreciative that our two head principals were able to join us at our last policy meeting and, help us wrestle with and help inform us about a lot of the reasoning behind past decisions. But we are continuing to move that forward. We're also going to be taking a look at an edit to our current curriculum policy to find a way to get board feedback prior to the revision process beginning. So have high hopes of being able to bring that to the board in March.
Thank you, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Mr. Lee?
For the HVAC IAQ building committee, they are ready to go to bid by the end of the month for the first stage of the projects. Everything is lining up. They're working out the final paperwork with the state. On this next building committee, they will start the discussion on the next phases, and they plan to move accordingly on that too. And they will start coming up with a plan that will lead to all the designs, and it'll be put on the calendar. We'll have a calendar and see where we are and when that project can start also. But just to let everyone know, as of right now, the first stage is set to be completed in the summer of 2025 if all goes correct as planned.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Yep.
Any other liaison reports? Can't see everyone.
Jeff Peterson has his hand up, as does David Krasnoff.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, hi.
Hi, several things. First, to kind of Mike's point about State Board of Ed, we're trying to move the next meeting of the Finance Budget Committee to March 4th, so off the Wednesday, just to make sure. We didn't know we were going to be first on the agenda, so I didn't want everyone rushing back down from Hartford. At that meeting last week, we also got a mid-quarter financial update from Courtney. Not much has changed since the end of the Q2 report. We also started at a board member's request a discussion about superintendent's shift toward more administrative positions in the district, and so Mike was going to work on preparing a report for us that we'll bring up at a future meeting. So starting that discussion, we did not get I also wanted to talk briefly about the last Board of Finance meeting. There was a Board of Finance meeting last week at which there was some relevant information. There was a presentation.
Mr. Peterson, sorry, can you just face the computer a little bit more? We're having a hard time hearing you.
I'm trying, you know what? I was trying to be loud. I tried to change my settings. I apologize.
It's okay.
So at the last Board of Finance meeting, there were a couple of things that were relevant to the Board of Ed. There were some changes that were recommended by the town's external financial auditor that Courtney says she's received and has prepared a response for. So that something that came up in that meeting that sounds like is in process. Also, there was a discussion by the town's financial advisor, Phoenix Advisors, about comparing Fairfields to other AAA rated towns in the state, which I think is very relevant because this discussion comes up anytime we try to finance anything through bonding. And obviously the town has a vested interest in trying to maintain its AAA bond rating. So this presentation was, comparing, seeing where we stack up. Are we stronger in some areas? Are we weaker in some areas? So I found that very enlightening in terms of the discussions that we're going to be having, and we are continually having, about how much bonding capacity there is. So if anyone wants any more information, I'm happy to talk about that or point you to the backup from that meeting. But again, when it comes to facilities and our non-recurring capital budgets, that discussion about AAA is always relevant.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Krasnoff.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to lower my hand. It's not going down. Okay. So the other day I got a tour from Dr. Dumas over at CES of their new facility. It is actually on pace to be completed. Should be up and running by next year. So they're going to be moving a lot of things around and expanding their space. The building's very nice. I also got a lot of good information about what they opted to do that I would love to bring to our facility. So I'll be bringing some more up tomorrow.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think that's it. So legislatively, as we all know, that the General Assembly legislative session began February 7th last week. So I'm sure everyone is aware that I am watching on a daily basis what is happening up in Hartford this session, and will of course bring any questions or concerns that I might have to central office as things proceed and how it may be impacting for Fairfield. So I am on the watch for that. Other than that, I don't see any other hands. Open board comment. Anyone? No? All right. Marco, do we have public comment and by any chance for anyone who's on the line that didn't get a chance to speak? And I apologize greatly to those who may have been waiting.
Yes, we have Mick McGarry on the line currently.
Okay. All right. Do we want to let him go? Thank you.
Sure.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you so much. So first, I hope everyone had a good day today. No one's brought their back shoveling, and we're able to, spend some family time together. If you have young ones, making snowmen and sledding, etc. There are a few items on today's agenda that I just want to make some comment on about collaboration and time, really. With the ELA curriculum, the school calendar policy, and the CAD classes. The CAD classes, I'm very glad the discussion came up about the flexibility needed. And, Mr. Gestani was, very correct that there are not a lot of students who are taking these classes, but it is a pretty specific and high achieving population. And, there is flexibility that is needed for these students to be able to continue in the classes that they're taking and be fulfilled in what they're doing. So I do hope the board takes that under consideration. And in speaking of time, the calendar policy revisions certainly seem to clarify dates and intentions, and it seems like very good work overall. But I would encourage the board to please talk to the teaching staff more, especially when it comes to as we're coming closer to the elementary conferences. We are running into the point, there aren't a lot of teachers, but there are teachers there who have simply more students and parents than there are conference slots available. So the next couple of days, I'd like to work with central office to make sure that there's very clear communication about, what to parents that this is why, teachers need to, reschedule or do something with the conference. It's not the teacher's fault. And I want to make sure that the teachers, don't feel uncomfortable in this conversation with parents, and if some change needs to be made to that, and that might be a consideration for calendars going forward. And then just finally, again with time, the ELA curriculum, there is a revision in the document now that is highly directive of teachers' time, and could fundamentally change some of the hard work that teachers put into the document. But this revised curriculum does require grade level meetings. And I would just like for the board to be cognizant and to think about the fact that, this work would have to be done during contractual time. And, I'm not sure how that would be directed, but I just want to make sure that takes place during, department time or contractual time and, not time outside of that. And, otherwise, thank you very much for your time. And it is 8:39. How about that? Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. McGarry, and sorry you had to wait. Anyone else, Marco?
No, the other individual did not come back on the line.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, and with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the regular meeting of the Board of Education adjourned. Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Peterson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 9-0. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for accommodating this. I hope it went okay, and we will see you next time. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.